So the excerpt, it says Jeff Baena, husband of Aubrey Plaza, died at 47, and the LA medical examiner saying it was suicide. What's your first thought seeing that?
Well, it's just tragic, isn't it? Reminds us that mental health, it can affect anyone, no matter how successful they seem, how creative they are. Baena, for anyone who might not know, he was a pretty respected director, made films like Life After Beth, The Little Hours, kind of known for that dark humor, often starring Aubrey Plaza, his wife.
You know, you mentioned the dark humor in his films. Makes me wonder, is there like a connection between an artist's work and their struggles? I'm not saying it applies to Baena specifically, but just generally speaking.
That's a tough one, isn't it? Art, it can be an outlet, even therapy, but it's not necessarily a direct reflection of someone's mental state. Got to be careful about connecting those dots too directly, you know, the work and the personal stuff.
Right. Separate the art from the artist. Which leads us to this medical examiner's determination of suicide. A difficult topic to talk about, but important we don't shy away from it.
Definitely. And while we can't know what Baena was going through specifically, this kind of news, it can spark a bigger conversation, right? About suicide, about the pressures people face in these high-demand fields, like filmmaking.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. The entertainment world with the long hours, the competition, the public eye always on you. It's got to be a pressure cooker, you know?
Exactly. So much focus on outward success might hide the struggles going on inside. Important to remember, everyone copes differently, and asking for help, that takes strength, not weakness.
It sounds like we need to be talking more openly about this. Mental well-being, especially in those kinds of high-pressure jobs.
For sure. And not just those jobs either. It's relevant to everyone, right? Knowing the signs someone might be struggling, what resources are out there, just being there for someone, it can make a huge difference.
So we look at this news about Jeff Baena, the medical examiner's report. What really hits home for me is how important it is to have that support, that awareness around mental health.
Couldn't agree more. As you think about this, try to consider this. What can we each do individually to make things better? Checking in on friends, pushing for better mental health resources, just learning about the signs someone might be struggling, there's always something we can do.
That's a powerful thought to leave with everyone. We all have a part to play in making mental well-being a priority. It's a difficult thing to process for sure, but as we go through these sources, our aim is to get to know Baena's career, his art, what made him tick as a filmmaker.
Yeah, and I think that's a great approach. Looking at his early career, we see that he graduated from NYU Film School, which I think speaks to his commitment to the craft. And then right out of the gate, he co-writes I Heart Huckabees back in 2004.
I Heart Huckabees.
Yeah.
Now that's a cult classic. What does that early work tell us about him working with someone like David O. Russell on such a philosophical comedy?
It's really fascinating, I Heart Huckabees. While a mainstream film leans heavily into the absurd to explore some pretty existential questions.
Yeah.
And that's something we'll see echoed in Baena's own directorial style later on.
So even early on, he wasn't going for those straightforward laughs. There were these deeper layers.
Exactly. And then in 2014, he makes his directorial debut with Life After Beth. This is not only his first film as director, but it's also where his path significantly intertwines with Aubrey Plaza's.
Okay, so here's where it gets interesting. So they met in 2011, and Life After Beth is not their only collaboration.
Right.
Plaza went on to star in Joshie the Little Hours and Spin Me Round.
Right, and it's more than just casting your partner in your films. You see a real synergy in their work together. There's this consistent tone, this blend of dark humor and quirky situations that feels very unique to their collaborations.
So it wasn't just romance, it was a true artistic partnership.
Absolutely.
But tell me, did their personal relationship ever cause tension in their art?
Yeah.
I read some critics argue that Plaza wasn't challenged enough in Baena's films.
That's a really interesting question. There's certainly a debate to be had. Some critics felt Plaza's roles, while well suited to her comedic talents, didn't allow her dramatic range to shine as brightly as it could have.
A valid point. But let's get back to their relationship for a moment. They were married in 2020, and it was Plaza who confirmed it in 2021 while they were filming Spin Me Round in Italy.
Yes, in her typical deadpan style, she posted on Instagram, "So proud of my darling husband at Jeff Baena for dreaming up another film that takes us to Italia to cause some more trouble."
That's so Aubrey Plaza. And their wedding itself was quite unconventional, wasn't it?
Very much so. It was a low-key ceremony on their 10th anniversary, orchestrated through a website called onehourmarriage.com.
Really?
Apparently it was Plaza's idea, and even Baena was surprised to find out it was possible.
Wow. Talk about a pandemic wedding story.
Yeah.
What does this tell us about them as a couple, and maybe even as artists?
I think it speaks to their playful nature, their willingness to embrace the unconventional, and maybe even a hint of rebellion against traditional norms. Does that resonate with you?
It definitely does. And knowing that adds another layer to their films, especially when we consider that Spin Me Around, their final collaboration, was released in 2022.
It's almost as if we're looking back on a completed chapter of their story together, and it makes you wonder, how does that knowledge, the knowledge of their relationship and its tragic end, affect how we experience their films?
That's a great question. We'll definitely have to keep that in mind as we delve deeper into their collaborations. But before we move on, the e-article reminds us that Baena leaves behind family members who are undoubtedly grappling with this loss.
Yes, his mother Barbara, his father Scott, his brother Brad, and various step-family members. It's a reminder that behind the art, there are real people grieving a profound loss. It's heavy stuff.
Absolutely. It's hard to reconcile this with the humor we see in his work. It makes you wonder about the mind of an artist, doesn't it?
It certainly does, but I think for today, let's focus on celebrating his creative output, starting with Life After Beth, the film that really solidified their partnership.
Perfect. We can all agree it's a zombie comedy. But for those of you listening who haven't seen it, what makes Life After Beth more than just your average zom-com?
Well, Baena uses the zombie trope not for scares, but to explore the anxieties of young love loss and the complexities of family relationships. It's a deeply personal film disguised as a genre flick.
And Plaza's performance as Beth, the titular character who returns from the dead, is absolutely brilliant. She brings this perfect blend of deadpan humor and genuine emotion to the role. It's one of her most memorable performances, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely, and knowing Plaza's comedic style, which is usually rooted in irony and sarcasm, how do you think she adapted to Baena's more absurdist and fantastical tone?
Well, she seems completely at ease in this world that Baena creates. She's not afraid to be goofy, to embrace the physical comedy of the role, and she does it all while maintaining this emotional core that makes you genuinely care about Beth, even when she's eating people.
That's a great point. I think Baena's direction allows her to be both hilarious and heartbreaking at the same time. It's a testament to their chemistry as collaborators.
And it's a reminder that even in the most absurd situations, there's always room for real human connection. Life After Beth is a film that stays with you long after the credits roll.
And that's a perfect segue into our discussion of The Little Hours, which takes us to a completely different setting and time period, but continues to showcase their shared comedic sensibility.
All right, so we're moving from zombies to nuns. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
The Little Hours transports us to a 14th century convent, but this is no stuffy history lesson.
Okay.
Imagine Aubrey Plaza as a nun, and you start to get the idea of what we're dealing with here.
Okay, now I'm really curious. So we have nuns, we have Aubrey Plaza, and we're talking about Jeff Baena's the king of quirky comedy. What exactly is going on in this film?
The film follows three nuns who, shall we say, are not exactly paragons of virtue.
Yeah.
They're bored, they gossip, they get into these petty squabbles.
Yeah.
In other words, they're surprisingly relatable even for a modern audience.
And then a handsome young servant, played by Dave Franco, arrives at the convent. I can only imagine the chaos that ensues.
You're spot on, and the film doesn't shy away from that chaos. There's forbidden romance, drunken antics, lots of witty banter. But what's interesting is how Baena uses the seemingly light-hearted premise to explore some deeper themes.
Like, what's he really trying to say with The Little Hours?
Well, think about it. You have these nuns who are supposed to be devoted to a life of piety, but they're constantly engaging in behaviors that go against their vows.
Right.
It's a satire of religious hypocrisy, but it also touches on the repression of women in that era.
Yeah.
Remember, these women had very limited choices in life.
So he's using humor to kind of critique societal norms and expectations. But how does that translate to the film's style? What should we be paying attention to when we watch The Little Hours?
One thing to notice is the dialogue.
Okay.
It's modern, even anachronistic at times, which creates this jarring contrast with the medieval setting. It's as if Baena is deliberately highlighting the absurdity of trying to fit these characters into these rigid societal roles.
So he's using that clash between old and new to make a point. It's like he's saying, hey, some things never change no matter what century you're in.
Exactly, and keep an eye on the visual elements too.
Okay.
The film is beautifully shot, but there's often this sense of claustrophobia of being trapped within the convent walls.
Yeah.
It mirrors the character's own sense of confinement.
You've shared that the film is loosely based on the Decameron by Boccaccio.
Right.
But how does Baena put his own unique spin on this classic text?
Well, the Decameron is a collection of novellas, often bawdy and satirical, that explore the complexities of human nature. Baena takes that spirit and runs with it, amping up the absurdity and infusing it with his signature blend of dark humor and social commentary.
And how does Plaza's performance as Sister Fernanda fit into all of this?
Plaza is fantastic in this film. Her character, Sister Fernanda, is rebellious, quick-witted, and constantly pushing the boundaries. She embodies the film's themes of female empowerment and resistance against societal constraints. It's a performance that really showcases her range as an actress.
From what I've read, she delivers some of the most memorable lines in the film. Do you have a favorite?
One that always sticks with me is when Sister Fernanda says, "If I were a man, I could punch someone in the face." It's a simple line, but it encapsulates the frustration and powerlessness that many women felt and still feel in a patriarchal society.
That's a great example of how Baena and Plaza use humor to address serious issues. They make you laugh, but they also make you think. It's thought-provoking, but in a way that doesn't feel heavy-handed.
Right, and I think that's part of what makes their collaborations so appealing. They don't shy away from difficult topics, but they approach them with the sense of playfulness and wit that makes them engaging for the audience.
Okay, so we've gone from a zom-com about young love and loss to a period comedy about nuns behaving badly. What can you tell us about their final collaboration, Spin Me Round? Where does that fit into their creative journey?
Spin Me Round is an intriguing departure.
Okay.
It's a dark comedy with a touch of thriller set against the backdrop of Tuscany, Italy. And it revolves around Amber, played by Plaza, who wins a trip to a culinary institute. But things take a sinister turn when she starts to suspect there's more to this idyllic retreat than meets the eye.
So we're back in Italy, a location that seems to hold special significance for Baena and Plaza, considering they filmed their playful wedding announcement there.
Yeah.
But how does Spin Me Round differ from their previous work?
While their signature humor is present, Spin Me Round ventures into darker, more unsettling territory. It's as if they were intentionally pushing their boundaries, both as filmmakers and as a couple.
And what about Plaza's character, Amber? What can you tell us about her journey in the film?
Amber is a woman who's feeling disillusioned with her life.
Yeah.
She's stuck in a dead-end job, her relationship is going nowhere, and she's yearning for something more. The trip to Italy initially seems like the answer to her prayers, but it quickly turns into a surreal and unsettling experience.
It sounds like Spin Me Round might be the most complex and layered film. Would you agree?
I think so. It's a film that rewards multiple viewings. There's so many layers to unpack, from the satirical take on corporate culture and the fetishization of Italian culture to the exploration of female desire and the dangers of trusting appearances.
It seems like Baena and Plaza were really honing their craft with Spin Me Round, taking all the elements they'd explored in their previous films and pushing them even further.
Absolutely, and I think that's what makes it such a fitting final chapter to their collaborative journey. It's a film that showcases their growth as artists and their willingness to experiment and take risks.
So we've discussed 3 of their collaborations, Life After Beth, The Little Hours, and Spin Me Round. Each film unique yet connected by their shared sense of humor and their exploration of human relationships.
It's a fascinating body of work made even more poignant by the knowledge of their personal connection and the tragic circumstances of Baena's passing.
For those of you listening, have you seen any of these films? What resonates with you about their collaborations? Think about the way they use humor to tackle serious topics, the way they subvert expectations, and the way they create characters that are both relatable and unforgettable.
Their films are a testament to the power of creative partnership and a reminder that even in the face of darkness and loss, art can provide solace, laughter, and a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
Beautifully said. But before we wrap up this deep dive, we have one more film to touch upon, Joshi. This is a film directed by Baena, but Plaza doesn't star in it. However, her presence is still felt.
That's right. Plaza has a small but memorable role in Joshi, and it's a film that in some ways bridges the gap between their earlier work and Spin Me Round.
Okay, tell me more. What can you tell us about Joshi and how it fits into the larger picture of their collaborative dynamic? Okay, so we're talking about Joshi, a film that Baena directed, but Plaza doesn't have a starring role. This feels like a bit of a detour, but you said it's important. What should we know about this film?
Well, Joshi centers around this group of friends that go on a bachelor party weekend after the groom-to-be tragically loses his fiancée. It's a comedy, but one that deals with grief, male friendship, and the awkwardness of trying to find joy in the face of loss.
So it's a bit more grounded, less fantastical than some of their other collaborations. Where does Plaza fit into all of this?
Plaza has a supporting role as Jen, a woman that one of the friends meets during the trip. Her character is sharp observant and adds a layer of complexity to the group dynamic. It's a smaller role for her, but it shows her range. She's not just the quirky lead, she can hold her own in a more dramatic ensemble piece.
And how does Joshi connect to their other films? You've said it kind of bridges the gap between their earlier work and Spin Me Round. What do you mean by that?
I think Joshi has that same blend of humor and pathos that we see in their other collaborations, but it also hints at the darker, more introspective direction that Baena's filmmaking was heading towards.
For our listeners, if you've seen Josh Alanti, how does Plaza's performance differ from her work in Life After Beth or The Little Hours? Does it change your perception of her as an actress?
I think it really showcases her versatility. You know, she can deliver those laugh-out-loud moments, but she can also convey deep emotion with subtle gestures and expressions. It makes you realize that she's more than just a comedic talent. She's a nuanced performer who can adapt to a variety of roles and genres.
We've explored Baena's films, the unique voice he brought to comedy, his evolution as a filmmaker, and of course the profound impact of his creative partnership with Aubrey Plaza. What are your final thoughts on their legacy?
It's bittersweet, isn't it?
Yeah.
We have this body of work that's funny, challenging, and ultimately very human, but knowing it was cut short, that we won't see more from this duo, that's hard.
It is. But as we've discussed today, the films are there for us to revisit, to analyze, to laugh with, and to learn from.
And I hope our listeners, you included, will do just that. Go back and watch these films, pay attention to the details, the dialogue, the visual choices, think about what resonates with you.
We've talked about their shared sense of humor, their willingness to tackle difficult topics, and their ability to create characters that stay with you long after the credits roll. But there's something else I've been pondering. We know Baena's passing was by suicide. How does that knowledge, that darkness, affect how we interpret the humor in his films?
That's a really profound question. It's almost impossible to separate the artist from their art, especially when dealing with such a tragic event.
Right, it makes you look for clues, for hints of that darkness within the humor.
Then maybe that's okay. Maybe it deepens our understanding of the work, adds another layer of complexity. But it's also important to remember that art is subjective. What one person finds funny, another might find unsettling.
Absolutely. We all bring our own experiences and perspectives to the art we consume. And that's what makes it so powerful. It can spark conversations, challenge our assumptions, and even help us process our own emotions.
So as we conclude our deep dive into the world of Jeff Baena and Aubrey Plaza, I'd like to leave you with this thought. We've explored their films, their creative process, their unique partnership. But how has this journey, this deep dive, changed your perception of their work?
It's a question worth pondering, and one that I hope will stay with you long after this episode ends. Jeff Baena and Aubrey Plaza left behind a legacy that deserves to be celebrated, debated, and most importantly, experienced.
So thank you for joining us on the deep dive. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going.